Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next installment of the BSO's Virtual Governing Members Lounge. Once again, I'm Allison Burr-Livingston, the BSO's Vice President of Development, and it is once again a pleasure to welcome you to our virtual conversation from my home, viewing into yours. Normally, we are live. Tonight, we are actually pre-recorded, in part to be cognizant of the time difference for one of our very special guests, which we will get into very shortly. But for those who are viewing as a return, welcome back. For those who are viewing for the very first time, let me just remind you what the Virtual Governing Members Lounge is. Very simply, our donor lounges at both the Meyerhoff and at Strathmore are places for dedicated conversation and exclusive artist content. Particularly during these times of social distance, we wanted to not only continue that content and those conversations with our donors, but also invite more members of the BSO family to join us. So we're excited you're here. While we don't have a live Q&A ready and raring to go, I promise it'll still be a great conversation and a great evening, and we will get back to live once again next week. Okay, so after forays into music with film, including The Wizard of Oz and last week's Symphony in Space Digital Festival, I know I'm a little excited to get back to our classical and romantic orchestral roots with an evening all about the great Rachmaninoff. And really, we have no better guest than to join me in that conversation, obviously including our very own music director, Marin Alsop. Marin, it is so nice to see you again and so nice to see that you're keeping well.
Thanks, it's great to be here. Hi, everybody.
And we are also joined by the venerated Russian-American pianist with unique ties to Rachmaninoff herself, the great Olga Kern. Olga, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. It's great to see you.
And I know that you're coming to us live from Moscow, so all the more relevant to this evening's conversation. As a great introduction to Olga, just because I know members of our BSO family maybe last saw you when you were with us in the 15-16 season, just a little bit of a reminder. Olga, I think you were born into a family of musicians. You began studying piano at the age of 5, a laureate of many international competitions. You were the first prize winner of the Rachmaninoff International Piano Competition at the age of 17, and really jump-started your U.S. career with your historic gold medal at the Cliburn International Piano Competition, and I think was the first woman to do so in 30 years. So again, wonderful to be surrounded by leading women. I know that you have extensive discography, and you also have various efforts that you do to support and encourage the careers of budding young pianists and musicians, and maybe we can get a little bit into that this evening. Okay. But in the end, I'm just glad that you're here, and once again, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, while we couldn't bring Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto to life this weekend, which Olga, originally we were going to do with you, we are excited to be featuring an all Rachmaninoff program on next season's schedule, Marin, under your baton, and thought that it would be fun to get together for really an off-the-cuff conversation about Rachmaninoff with really a focus on the composer's piano concertos, which I think is very important and poignant given his role not only as a composer, but also his own virtuoso skills as a pianist. So, maybe to get started, Marin and Olga, I know that this is a reunion for you. Maybe you could expand a little bit on your other conversations, be it about Rachmaninoff and your other times when you've been able to bring Rachmaninoff to life.
Well, Olga and I, we have collaborated many, many times, and several times on Rachmaninoff, haven't we, Olga?
Yes, Rachmaninoff Rhapsody on a Theme by Paganini, then Rachmaninoff #1, Rachmaninoff #4, and I was looking forward for #3.
I know we were trying to go for the, the sort of trifecta, I guess. Yeah, we'll have to revisit it. But Olga, what's so marvelous, I think, is to have this direct connection that you have to Rachmaninoff. Just for people who may not know the history, so Rachmaninoff, he was well known as a pianist, not so well known as a composer, and also as a conductor, right?
Yes, correct.
And he eventually moved to the United States during the Second World War. They had to escape, of course, and but but he never really felt at home here in the States, I don't think. And his whole career was really an effort to be taken seriously as a composer. But there are certain things about Rachmaninoff that set him apart from everyone else as a pianist, namely the size of his hands, right? Maybe you can talk to that a little bit.
Yes, you're right completely. Of course, he wanted to be known more as a composer. This is why he actually performed his compositions all the time in his recitals and concerts. His hands were enormous, beautiful, big hands. But the thing is that the most importantly is that it was a comfortable hands. It was not just a big hands. You know, sometimes pianists have a huge hands and it's very uncomfortable to play. But I'm sure when he was performing and he was actually composing for piano, it was so comfortable every time, you know, for him to play. And actually when even, you know, nowadays, every pianist, when they play his music, it's always kind of comfortable because it's a pianistically written, you know. Yes, there's a lot of chords, there's a lot of really a big technique, but still it's comfortable, even knowing that he had really big hands. But for example, Alicia de la Roche, we know this wonderful recording of her Rachmaninoff's third piano concerto, and she had really small hands, and she plays the whole concerto without any problems. So it's just so pianistically well written that this is why we pianists just love playing him, you know. And of course, when you have a bigger hand, it's more comfortable. It's just easier to approach his music. I have pretty good size of a hand. It's just for my height, it's fine. It's just a good size, and it's comfortable for me to play his music. I can't reach as him 13 keys, you know. Actually, my son can. He has a huge hand. And sometimes, you know, with the big hand, you can't really be too close to the end of the keyboard, you know. You really need to, because the palm is just too big. So this is why we play a little bit differently, you know. So for me, it's a perfect kind of size that I can just be very comfortable and place the whole hand, the whole and the fingers and the hand all on the keyboard. So this is why I of course, not because of that only, but it's also a big part that is very comfortable for me to play his music.
Well, you know, I think that the fact that Rachmaninoff was so revered as a soloist is an important part of his life and his history. The first major work he wrote for orchestra was his first symphony, and that was premiered, I think it was in 1897, if I'm right. And apparently there's a story about the other composer, Glazunov, conducting, that he was drunk when he was conducting it. So he made a big mess about it, and I guess it really bombed. It did not go well at all. Do you know anything about the drunken part? Have you heard that too?
Yes. It's a very famous part.
So Rachmaninoff did not have a good reception for that first orchestral piece. And, you know, that threw him into, he was, I think, predisposed toward depression. And that really catapulted him into a downward momentum. And he didn't compose anything for 3 years. As a matter of fact, he destroyed the parts and the score to his first symphony. It was only after his death that someone discovered some parts to it. So this gives us some insight into Rachmaninoff and his psyche, because he was very, very sensitive about all of these things. And don't you feel it in his music always? There's that sort of, this unrest and discomfort constantly. I mean, of course, finally he had tremendous success with his second symphony, thank heavens, you know, but his composing career went up and down like this. You know, some pieces had great reception and many did not, sadly. But his third piano concerto is I would say notorious, right? Because, I mean, I don't know how many of you listening saw that film Shine, but this was all about the struggle of this young person to play the third piano concerto. Do you have any feelings about it? There certainly are. How many notes did they say in that film? I think they said like 40,000 notes or something like that.
Something like that. You know, some pages just look scary. Some pages of this concerto looks black completely, just full of keys, and that's it, you know, and the third movement especially. So it's really something special. I don't know how Rachmaninoff himself wrote all of these notes for this concerto, how many hours he spent just to write it down. But I actually, how I saw this film, it was shown in the Moscow Film Festival when it just came out, and Jeffrey Rush came that time to Moscow, and I just won the Rachmaninoff International Piano Competition, and I played Rachmaninoff third already that time. I was only 17, and they asked me to play before the movie.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, I had no idea what the movie is about. So I played the whole concerto, and then they invited me to see the movie, and I met Jeffrey Rush. I was super excited about it, but I didn't speak English very well that time. But anyway, I have a beautiful picture with him. Then I saw the movie, and I was so surprised to see that it's all about this concerto. And how this young, as you said, the young person was struggling, and his father was just so, pushing, and the psychological factor, the stress to be able to finish this concerto, and he couldn't finish because it was just too much, probably stress and nerves. For me, of course, playing this piece since 15 years old, when I saw the movie, I was a little bit skeptical because I thought, if I'm playing it,
right,
what's wrong with that person? But, later on, many years later, I understand that everything can be possible, especially with music like this, because it's not just powerful physically, but it's powerful emotionally, And for me, I think when I learned it, what was helpful that when my mom was pregnant with me, she was playing this concerto.
So you think it was in your blood already?
I think I heard it when I was in my mom's belly, and I believe in it because when I was pregnant with my son, I played a lot of Brahms and Schubert as his favorite composers. So
wow.
And you have another upper hand on this as well, Olga. You were sharing a little bit with Marin and I your family ties to Rachmaninoff, and I think you actually have an original or an original Rachmaninoff score for. Is it for the?
Yes, I'll show you now. I'll show you now. If just 1 second. Yes. So it's one of the first editions of Rachmaninoff piano concerto. It's all hand, painted. Unfortunately, it's already falling apart because I used it too much. So this is how it looks, and it's very comfortable actually scores because it's pretty big, so you can see every key written, very well written. And then
you can see all those 30,000 notes.
I'm not using it anymore. Look how many just chords and notes. This is the cadenza of the first movement, the big cadenza. So that's really very unique scores, and I can't use it anymore because I used it a lot. So I thought that it will stay in my parents' place. So this is why I could show you and share it with you, because it's here in Moscow, not in New York, not in my place. Who I have it from, it's my great-grandmother, and I will show you her a picture. She was a singer, that's her, and that's her again. He was performing with Rachmaninoff. He was accompanying her. This is from, I think, Dargamishsky Mermaid Opera. So, and he was accompanying her in 1910 before he immigrated to the United States. So they knew each other and they performed together. So that's a very special part that Rachmaninoff genius touched my family a little bit.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's so amazing.
Did your grandmother talk to you about that experience?
Unfortunately, grandmother passed away when I was born, but my grandfather, he was still alive, but in a communist time, they didn't want to talk about anything.
Yeah.
So little by little, only lately he was showing, photos, and then his great grandmother, my great grandmother, she was friend with Tchaikovsky, and we have absolutely unique letters and photos from Tchaikovsky to her. But he already gave it to Tchaikovsky Museum in Moscow. So he started to open up about this. And Rachmaninoff was in the Second World War. He was enemy of Russia, of Soviet
Of course,
Union.
because he had emigrated. Yeah.
So no one could say a word about Rachmaninoff. This is why all of Rachmaninoff's scores were always hidden under the beds, under the anything. So this is why he was not talking much about it. But at least we have some now stories that I can share, and then some programs, and of course these letters which are unique.
That's a wonderful connection. I think something for people to think about when Rachmaninoff is composing these pieces. You have to think about the other composers who are alive, and two of them come to mind, of course, Stravinsky and Schoenberg, who were writing dramatically different types of music. So here comes this person with the heart on the sleeve, romanticism, writing beautiful melodies. And I think most people felt it was out of touch with the day, that it was too old-fashioned. But today it feels so welcoming, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a popular music right now nowadays. Oh, yeah, with the harmonies, with the melodies, it just feels like that. This is why a lot of his, like from the second concerto and the Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini was used in a lot of movies, Hollywood
movies and pop songs and everything. Yeah, from his second symphony too.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So thank you, Olga, so much for sharing the idea of story and also your personal family connection history. And I think we talked a little bit about this, Marin, but there's really a unique story behind all of Rachmaninoff's piano concerti. So maybe you can start a little bit with the second, and then we can kind of move into the third in that way.
Sure. The story about the second piano concerto is that Rachmaninoff had been suffering from terrible depression, and really writing the second piano concerto was a way out. And he had been seeing a psychiatrist, someone who specialized in hypnotism and meditation and relaxation techniques. And Rachmaninoff hadn't composed, I think, in 3 years. And somehow this doctor was able to reconnect him with a desire to compose. And so at the top of our scores, we see the dedication to the doctor.
That's so interesting. And what about the third? I think there's something to do with a ship, and maybe he learned this piece in silence to a certain degree.
And Rachmaninoff wrote the third piano concerto as a showcase, really, for himself on a tour to the United States. He wanted to show off as the leading virtuoso of his time. And I think that's part of why the piece is so incredibly difficult, because almost everything was easy for Rachmaninoff, except this piece. I think it was hard, even for him. But he had to learn it, apparently, on a silent keyboard on the ship. I don't know whether there was no piano or whether, there were no piano playing was allowed. I'm not sure which it was. Maybe both.
Yeah. And that's interesting on the idea of virtuosity. And I think that's a bit of a theme that actually you've interwoven into the structure of next season's programs. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But I wonder, Marin, when you approach the podium to lead works like this, whereby you have that triple threat, where it is a composer who is also a virtuoso and writing for his instrument and to show off, do you approach that podium any differently in terms of bringing that intention to life? Does that talk us through a little bit of that process.
Well, I think the approach is not so much about who's composed the piece, but more the relationship with the soloist and the conductor. And Olga and I have a very long and I think very rewarding partnership. So we've performed with each other on many, many continents, all across the world. And I think having that, it's like meeting up with an old friend, you know, that you just kind of pick up where you left off. Oh yeah, I remember. It takes, what do you think, 10 minutes, Olga? And then we're connected again.
Yes, yes.
So
it's always such a pleasure. You know, there are always these connections. So it's priceless, you know.
It is. It's something that's very hard to describe. I can only say that for those of you who have a friend that you haven't spoken to in a year or two, and then you pick up the phone and it's like you were talking yesterday. Same thing.
Exactly.
So it's more of my approach to this is much more of a collaborative spirit and a supporting role to the pianist in this case, because it's a balance always, you know, between the orchestra and the soloist, between the conductor and the soloist, and trying to strike that perfect balance is always the goal.
Makes total sense.
You know, speaking of collaborations, I think the relationship between a composer and conductor is so crucial. Without the conductor to champion one's music, you know, it doesn't get the kind of performances that one needs. And Rachmaninoff and Eugene Ormandy with the Philadelphia Orchestra had that kind of magical relationship. Ormandy premiered all of Rachmaninoff's pieces. And, you know, it's interesting because he ended up performing many of them, even for the first time. The Rachmaninoff Paganini variations were first premiered in Baltimore because the Philadelphia Orchestra used to perform regularly at the Lyric Theater in Baltimore.
That's great. And I think we had a bit of an image there from the Philly archives in that regard. And I know obviously what we will likely play out on this evening, we do have a recording of Olga when you were last with the BSO or previously with, and I think we have the theme on a Paganini to be able to share with us in the end. Before we close out, is there anything else that maybe we can talk about? Like, what does Rachmaninoff's legacy mean to both of you? Obviously, I know his life ended in America. We talked a little bit about his piano concerto today, but clearly there's a much more expansive collection of impactful and powerful works.
Well, I think from our perspective today, you know, it's, as I was saying earlier, in the time that he lived, people really thought of him as old-fashioned. But I think we realized that this sense of melody and beauty and emotional expression is not old-fashioned, it's genuine. And it's something that really endures. And that's a testament to the fact that Rachmaninoff's pieces are probably some of the most revered by our listeners. And our musicians never get tired of playing his music. I don't know, Olga, do you get tired of playing his concerti? I can't imagine.
No, you know, I played his concerti so many times. I did all of them, all four, and the Rhapsody by Paganini. And I must say that every time I play each concerto, probably I played the most either number 3 or Rhapsody. Not number 2.
That's
because I learned first. I was 12 years old. I learned Rhapsody, and then I was 15. I learned number 3. So these two pieces were with me for many years. And I must say that every time I play it, every time is completely new. There is always something to look. When you look at the scores, there is always something to find, and there's always something new. It's incredible. You know, I always say to my students in Manhattan School of Music that they always must play a little bit of Rachmaninoff, even if they just, you know, play it for themselves at home practicing, because learning his music, you understand not just, of course, Russian music, Russian heart, because his soul was so Russian, that time. I can't even understand that Russian soul anymore because it's a different time, in Russia right now. But those times were, I think, unique because a lot of great Russians, artists, musicians, and painters and writers came from that time. So I must say that probably it was very special. And just to have that unique approach to music, yes, very romantic, but sometimes post-romantic and sometimes even jazzy, because he loved Gershwin. And of course, when he was in the United States, he just tried to get all of that interesting harmonies and all of that interesting side of jazz. I think all in his music is just very unique. You always hear Rachmaninoff music, and if you don't know what it's playing exactly, it's Rachmaninoff. It's just a unique Rachmaninoff. It's just that language is so unique that, yes, it's not Scriabin, it's not Tchaikovsky, it's Rachmaninoff.
Yeah, it's true. He has a signature sound.
It's something very special, and it touches every heart. And of course, for pianists, it's very important to play his music. He wrote a lot of etude tableaus, which are not just etudes; they are pictures. Every etude is a picture. A lot of preludes, a lot of great other pieces. Variations and sonatas, and a fantastic cello sonata. Great. He loved chamber music. Great trio. Piano trio, and of course fantastic songs for the voice and piano, but every time, even in that chamber music and voice compositions, a piano is a very special place. It's like on a special pedestal he puts piano as the instrument, and this is what I think is so valuable.
Even when he includes piano in the orchestration for a symphony or a symphonic work, the piano always plays a very prominent role. And just thinking about, emigrating to the United States and that whole experience, the last piece for orchestra he wrote was the symphonic dances. And it really is bringing in some of the jazz elements that you were mentioning, because there's a huge solo for saxophone in the first movement. And you hear a lot of these, it's sort of a Russian-American blending, isn't it? And
yes,
he was really a great genius. And I'm so glad to talk to you and have this direct, I feel like, okay, I almost could touch Rachmaninoff now.
Yeah, Rachmaninoff was always behind my shoulders. I always feel it, especially when I play his music. It's all these genius spirits, they're always with us in some ways. So,
it's true.
Yeah.
And I think that's Olga, I'm so sorry that we didn't get to play in person, but I know we will again soon.
I am sure we will.
And I look forward to it.
It's always very special with you. Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you again for what a wonderful conversation. And thank you so much, Olga, for sharing not only your perspective, but also your personal mementos. Both the score and the picture is such a wonderful thing to help bring it home.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. And if this conversation has sparked everyone's desire to want to experience a little bit more of that unique Rachmaninoff sound for yourself, we're going to be ending this conversation with a moment from the end of, Olga, your performance with the BSO of the Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini. So everyone will enjoy that. And then I also encourage people to check out our offstage page under the performance videos. The BSO dug very deep into its archives and has posted there a full performance of actually the orchestra under Marin, a long predecessor of yours, David Zidman, from 1994 when the orchestra did its tour to Japan, but I believe that is actually Rachmaninoff Symphony No. 2. So we hope everyone will enjoy those, enjoy this beautiful music, and thank you both again for joining us in this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, Olga. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.